Hey,
What's up, man? How you doing?
I'm good. Thank you. How are you?
I'm fantastic. Super stoked to talk to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm happy to be here.
Oh, there's incredible. And so is it Serge? Is that how you pronounce your first name?
Yeah. Well, in Belgium we say Serge or Serge, but usually the English speaking people they say Serge. Yeah.
And see, I want to try and get it right with like the Flemish accent, but I figured I would not have it right. And I'm like, well, I know he's not like Russian, so it's not Sergey, but you
No,
know,
no, 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 no. No, but Serge is fine. Everything is fine.
awesome. Well, thank you so much for doing this, man. I don't know if you know much about us. We've really been reaching out to high level athletes that are open to sharing their experience, kind
Mm-hmm.
of the questions I sent over to you, just as like anchor points of you guys at the top level and women at the top level of the sport, really just having a quick conversation about your racing experience, your training experience, and kind of like the mindset going through it. It just sheds so much light and little pearls that other people can pick up and apply to their training, whether they're trying to get to
Yeah.
your level or they're trying to do like a grand fondo. Um, so again, thank you, man. This is incredible to have somebody of your caliber, and we're super grateful. And these podcasts have such an effect on so many people. So greatly
Yeah.
appreciate you
Wow.
sharing with that.
Well, great. Yeah. So I'm happy to share whatever you wanna know. Actually. Yeah.
Well, so I used to say this was the easiest question, but it's become the hardest question. What? Tell me.
Who is Serge Pauwels?
So I'm a retired professional cyclist. I've been professional for 15 years. Um, I've been lucky to be riding for one of the most beautiful teams in the world, and yeah, I've done the Olympics in 2016. I've got a background of applied economics at university, but I never really used my degree, of course, to be working in economics. I'm a father of two wonderful daughters, 4 and 5 years old, and yeah, now I'm development coach at Belgian Cycling. So I made the transition after cycling, yeah, pretty well, and I'm happy in the position I'm at now.
That's amazing. When you refer to the most beautiful team in cycling, which one is that?
Well, there's a couple of them, and I was every single one of them really had its charm, and maybe the one for me that was that has had the most magic was MTN Quebeca in 2015.
Okay.
Um, but I've also had a great time in Quickstep the years before, and in Sky Cervelo Test Team in Sport Vlaanderen. So yeah, even in CCC my last 2 years, I really enjoyed it a lot. So
It's
it's nice
it's
to get to see all the different cultures. So I was never really in the same team for 15 years, and that's the great thing about it.
you so this is literally one of my biggest curiosities. You had the ability to ride with different riders through different teams. I would imagine being, a kid growing up in Belgium, that you want to be on quick step. Maybe I'm incorrect in that. Like, I can see a lot of kids wearing quick step stuff.
Yeah.
What was the benefit of being on different teams? Was it more from just being around different riders all the time, or was it different management styles? Was it the race program? Um,
I think no. I To be honest, I never really changed teams on purpose. That's the first thing. But what I really like about having seen different cultures is just first of all that you meet a lot of different people,
mhm.
that you've ridden also different bikes, and whenever you ride in a New Jersey, it's always it's super nice. You have that new vibe in a different team, which always gives you extra motivation. And yeah, for me, it kind of came naturally to change every couple of years. But yeah, it's I think it widens you know, your horizon in cycling, and it really your everything you learn. I think you learn more when you see more different teams, different cultures.
It's really interesting you say that, because I remember, so I used to be in medical device sales before I went full on into cycling coaching, kind of what we're trying to build here. And I remember looking at a guy who was a C-level executive, and I was looking through his CV of where he had been. And it was like every 2 to 3 years, he was changing up the companies he worked for. And I looked at another guy, and I started like, then LinkedIn came out about, and you could see people's path in their career. And I talked to a guy, I'm like, why, you're taught as a collegiate student, like, you don't want to be jumping around all the time. It makes you look like something's wrong. And the guy was like, no, man, you grow, you gain a lot from where you're at. And then like that ship's kind of going one way. Like, it's not a bad thing to jump to a different ship and learn a different culture, get in with different people,
Yeah.
have new problems to solve. And it kind of always stuck with me. I was like, it was just an interesting, different way of seeing it. So it's cool to talk to somebody that has had that experience within cycling. And
Yeah.
to give context to people that might not be super familiar with all the teams and what you're talking about, you started back in 2006 on Top
Yeah.
Sport Bonderen, which is kind of known as developing pro.
Yeah.
Like, you're there and you're going to the next level.
Yeah.
Cervelo test team. Ted King was on. I don't know if you guys were on this at the same time. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely.
He
Yeah.
was just
Yeah.
on the other week, and
Yeah. I saw
then
that.
you were on the inaugural Team Sky, which had to be really
Yeah.
cool as that came together. And then you mentioned Quick Step, MTN, now Dimension Data, or the last time I looked at it, and then
Yeah.
CCC. So that's fantastic. So really open-ended question: when you look back, or maybe even more, one that you think of now working with development riders, what are some of the most important aspects of your training? I realize that's a huge question.
Yeah. And actually, I think the most important thing is never forget about the basics, And I mean, the basics is basically it's training, nutrition, and rest. And in training, I mean, there's no crazy tricks, It's and basically everybody kind of does the same. But I think a good amount of training, good volume. For me, a lot of medium intervals was important, to have that solid base. And then the recovery and the nutrition is your tool to get, to balance out freshness. And, because in the end, more training is better. But I mean, there is a trade-off, of course. You never want to overdo it. And the problem in road cycling is that the racing itself is really adding, I mean, it's adding a lot on top of the training you're already doing. The racing is pretty hard. I mean, if you go to Paris or a Grand Tour, I mean, it really it really kicks into your body. It's so I think that is a mistake that a lot of riders make, is that in the training itself, they don't take account into the racing that is still going to come also. So okay, you want to be race ready, but also you want to be able to absorb the racing still during the season. And especially now with the Corona situation in Belgium, for the young riders, it's like it's super important, to be balancing out, or to be flowing, let's say at 90% of their shape, because they can't really be 100%, because they don't know when their races are going to start. So it's also really important as a pro rider, like, always, keep a little bit of freshness into your legs during the season. Never give it all out on training. I mean, of course, training is going to be hard, but it's that kind of mentality you need to maintain during a season.
Dude, that clip right there is that's like the outtake of like explain training to people in a really good way. And it's funny, you know, that this is one reason why I have a coach. Even though I coach people are like, why do you have a coach? And I'm like,
Yeah.
because it's really hard for me to hold myself back, where my big goals,
Yeah.
racing is resuming here in the US, and two of my big goals
Mm-hmm.
are in June and August, and I have my first race coming up, and I'm like, dude, I don't know if I feel ready. He's like, you don't be 100%. If you're 100% right now, we screwed something up. Like, you're going
Yep.
to race, and then we're going to fine tune. I'm like, I know, but I
Yeah.
want to go crush people. And he's like, do you want to crush people now, or do you want to crush people in July? And I'm like, oh God, dude, thank you.
Yes, exactly.
It's so hard to
Yeah.
hold back. It is. I've told people it's not what I'm telling you to do sometimes, it's when I'm telling you not to do it. And it's just us as
Mm-hmm.
creatures. It's hard. Like, you see fitness, it's growing, you want to do more, you want to add on. That's amazing to hear from you say that. Jumping back, and if I ask you like a why question or like follow it up, it's not that I'm questioning you, it's just I know people want more detail. When you mentioned volume, what would you classify as big volume for people trying to race? So like in the US, category 1 racers will race against the lower level professionals. What would you say is high volume for that group of people, or people trying to race pro? And then what did you consider as medium riding, like tempo riding, or if you could define that?
Yeah. Let's say in the end, I think up to, you know, let's say 30,000 K a year, I think the more volume, the more you train, the better. Of course, you need to be able, to fit it in your work schedule, or, for people who have other activities. And as I said, the recovery and your nutrition, that is going to be crucial as well in the time you're not training. But in general, I would say the more you can be on the bike with just endurance rides, I mean, the better, because you're gonna have benefits from riding more. But then what for me, as I mentioned already, the medium sessions, they were really crucial, because that is what I started to build up from, let's say, December until the whole year round. And that is, medium is let's say defined as between 80 and 90% of your threshold power.
Okay.
So for me, if my threshold was around, let's say, 375, then medium would be between 300 and 340 watts, more or less. And I started, let's say, in December with 2 times 15 minutes at 300 watts, and then step by step building up to 2 times 20, 3 times 20, 310, 320, like always gradually increasing, so that you always just go a little bit out of your comfort zone, but never really out of yourself. And it's like a progressive overload. And in the end, you're playing, you're doing, let's say, 4 times 20 minutes at 340, and you feel like, the same as the ones you were doing at 300 in December. And that was something I really kept doing the whole year round. And then on top of that, I did a little bit of threshold work. And that was more like 8-minute power intervals. Yeah, that's basically it. Then I spiked the medium sessions. So I did like 30-second spikes within the medium. So every 5 minutes, like a 30-minute spike above 500 watts, let's say. But I never really did very anaerobic sessions. I really didn't feel a lot of benefits from it, and I always felt like it was not helping me a lot, because you get these kind of efforts already in the races, and yeah, I think for me it was better not to overdo it with the anaerobic sessions.
it's really popular here in the US to overdo like the group rides and to overdo the like super hard smashing. And people are like, well, I feel like I'm getting fit. I'm like, well, to a certain extent, because you're riding like maybe 8 to 10 hours, it's good to get some efforts in. But, you know, there's some
Yeah.
interesting stuff coming out about now more seeing train as we're turning the dials. Like if you become more anaerobic, your FTP is going to go down. And then the physiological side, you're going to start undergoing glycolysis sooner. And then all these things that
Yeah.
we're learning more about training is really interesting. So to hear, hey, how's it going?
Sorry.
No, it's okay. There's a future Olympian, Team Belgium. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So it's okay. Do you think that was more because of the type of rider that you were? Did you have other teammates that would do more anaerobic stuff, or and was that maybe more if they're more of like puncheur,
Yeah.
or how would that apply to their like different types of races?
I think maybe I think it was basically because I was a kind of rider that felt that I had to, you know, I needed a lot of depth in my shape, you know, for the races I wanted to do and for the grand tours and for the breakaways. And also, yeah, just my feeling, because of course I also tried the anaerobic stuff, but I never really felt like it was doing me so good. So
Yeah. So I'm trying to think in my head of somebody. Did you ever race with like Philippe Gilbert?
yeah,
So would
of
he
course.
like he strikes me as somebody that was maybe hitting those efforts more often just because that's like his finishing move, or do you think he would agree with that,
Yeah,
or would he maybe do that more often?
yeah, I think he probably did more of the anaerobic training sessions, but I don't really know exactly what he did.
Yeah.
But again, he's also, yeah, he was more of a classics type of rider, one day rider,
Yeah.
one day race. Yeah, it really depends what you're looking for in the races also, and what kind of rider you are.
Yeah. Yeah, fair enough. Were there any, so then as were you doing any like lifting or cross training during that like December to early
Yeah,
race season?
yeah. And even more and more, I would say every year. I really rated the gym work, and I even tried to keep doing it during the season, like once a week, which is a challenge because obviously when you're racing a lot. And for example, if you come back from a race like Dauphiné or Paris or whatever, the last thing you want to be doing on Monday is go to the gym and lift weights, you know, because and then it takes, then it's been 2 weeks since you've been in the gym last time, and you know it's going to be sore. So it's a challenge to keep doing it during the race season. But for sure, my best years were the years where I had a lot of, or some decent gym work in winter.
And without having to make you get super granular, do you lift heavy, or was it more like 15 to 20 reps and a little bit lighter, or did you mix it up?
In the beginning, like the early years, I did more like 15, 20. But then the last couple of years, it was more like between 8 and 4 to 5 repetitions, actually.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's I know lifting is so important. I love lifting. I'm still trying to, just what you said, I'm trying to figure out how I balance it with like, you know, when you get a plateau in lifting, then I'm like, am I just tired, or is it just the lifting and I need to change things up? And I'm really
Yeah.
excited for down the road, maybe in 5-10 years, when lifting is just more incorporated into cycling and there's better ways to track it. And I'm like,
Yes.
I guess I'll give it 60 TSS, like just a random number.
The thing is, with lifting, you start doing it, let's say 3 times a week, November, December, and then you start riding more and more, and so you become more fatigued, and then, yeah, as you said, you're reaching a plateau with the lifting, because you're not as fresh anymore because you're riding more often, so you can't lift these heavy weights anymore when you've been riding 4 hours the day before and maybe 2-3 in the morning before the lifting session. So but yeah, I think I still really believe in the benefits. Your muscles, they become much more responsive, and but then again, there is also the other trade-off, because in the winter I always reached a body weight of over 70 kilos, and in the summer I was under 65. So there was always 5 kilos of difference, and it was not only fat, it's also a bit of muscle and water weight. And to get really lean, I also didn't want to. I also had to lose a little bit of muscle, so it's really like that's finding a balance again. Yeah.
How did you find that balance? You're one of the guys, being a Grand Tour rider, like the watts per kilo definitely matter. Where was the trade-off? When were you like, I want to lose another kg, or I might lose a little power? Was it just experimentation over the years that you're like, this is where I'm at, this is my best, this is what I'm flying?
Yeah, kind of your ideal body weight, and usually before I went to the Tour, I always rode the Dauphiné, which is another big race in France, 3 weeks before the Tour de France, and that was always like my last wake-up call. So of course I was race ready, but I was still 1 or 2 kilos heavier than in the Tour. And you could feel it. I could feel in the Dauphiné always that I was, strong, but maybe not on my best in the mountains. So then after that, I knew, or I could, predict how much I still needed to lose to be 100% ready.
Okay. Did you have any, so as you went through your lifting, you're doing the medium training, the volume, as you get into the race season, as you had made the comment of the racing's hard, did you do maybe like a Tuesday training session, or did you have any favorite intervals or types of rides that you would do that you're like, okay, I feel really good? They were almost like a little litmus test as the racing went on, or was it just the racing was a litmus test and you were recovering in between each race?
Every 3 months, or let's say before an important race, I did one specific session, and that was just a 1 hour all out.
Dude, that's amazing.
And I mean, there's no better way to know your threshold than just the power that you can maintain for 1 hour, just to ride for 1 hour. And the thing is, it's not really about the power or about the effort, but it's about having no excuses and knowing, like, every year or every 3 times a year or so, 4 times a year, before the Tour or before Pays Basque or whenever the classics, I did that 1 hour session, and it's like, no excuses. I'm gonna ride for 1 hour as hard as I can and see what power I can get for 1 hour. And it felt always really good to have done it. It's and then I always felt like I'm ready.
That's awesome. Did you have a local climb that you would go to, like a mountain, or were you just?
No, because when I did it, I did it on the flat. I have like I live in Belgium, in an area where it's pretty flat, and of course I also went a lot to Italy and Spain to train in the hills. But when I was at home, I train. I have a lot of flat roads here. So, but the good thing is that I have a lot of canals where I can ride next to without having to stop. So I had a section, pretty much for 1 hour, where I could ride along the canal or the river without having to stop, or almost not having to stop. And so it's almost, it's 40K or something.
I can picture where you're talking about. I can picture where you're talking about. I was riding from Leuven to Mechelen and went up to Antwerpen.
Yeah, similar, something like that.
Yeah, it was a super fun ride. But yeah, extremely flat. It's awesome.
Yeah.
Got two last training questions for you. Is there anything that you find yourself that you had to adapt to in training as you went through these 12 years of being pro, or maybe even looking back to when you first started, things that had just changed where by the end you were like, man, I can't believe we were doing that 10 years ago or something like that? Things that have just changed over the years.
Yeah. I remember, for example, in Sport Vlaanderen, in my first 3 years, that we had so it was a Flemish team. So we always in the winter, I think 2 times a week, Tuesday and Thursday, we came together and we had group rides. And in the beginning, in November, it was like, it was just very relaxed, and we rode 3 hours or so. And then in the afternoon, we went and we played football. So soccer, as you call it probably. So, and yeah, it was super fun, but I cannot really imagine they're playing soccer at Jumbo Visma or Ineos right now in November. They'll be already at altitude. So
maybe a little cross training never hurt. Who knows? Get some lateral movement there from the football. You mentioned then, like, training being pretty basic, having it training, nutrition, rest. Was there any small thing that had a big impact, or was it really those three, or maybe something small within there that people don't think about?
I believe a lot in heat adaptation. And for me, that was, and I still believe it's more important than altitude. I really think for me that was kind of the holy grail to be training in, and for me it was Tuscany in Lucca, or in Spain, but usually before the tour I went to Tuscany, and to be training in 34 or 36 degrees Celsius. I don't know if you use Celsius or Fahrenheit.
That's super hot.
But anyway, pretty hot. And you want to really hit the wall, like really, come home after training, with your legs like half the size of the start of the ride, let's say, having lost 3 kilograms during the ride, a really red face, and because that is when when the adaptation is going to happen. And so usually when I had these kind of rides, then a couple days later the effect was immediately there. So like you kind of gain, let's say 20 or even 30 watts, like in my medium intervals with the same heart rate. It's incredible. And for me it was really important to do these sessions in the heat, because also in the tour, if you wanna do well, you need to be able to perform, to push the power after 4 hours in 30 or 30 degree 35 degrees or whatever, whatever the temperature is, but usually it's very hot, and that is the the bottleneck or the factor that is important in your performance, more than altitude, I think. Yeah.
That's really interesting. I moved down to the southern part of the US a few years ago, and I was a mess at like local races. I was just like sweating so much, not acclimated. And people will say, oh yeah, 2 weeks. And I'm like, it took me about a year and a half of just being in hot heat where I could go out and ride hard, like 3 hours into a ride. And it shows when we have US nationals, with the country being so large, when it's in the Southeast, or I mean, I guess we haven't had one in the Southwest in a while, but people that are from the Northeast, they just melt. It's like you might as well not even show up. You have no chance. They do have a chance, but it's much tougher. So that's good to hear. Do you use sauna then at all?
Yes, but I don't have a sauna at home. But that's also something I did whenever I was in Spain and a particular hotel I always went to. Then after training, I went into the sauna. But I still think the best thing is to have the heat in training, and to really, to do your sessions in the heat, and that gives always the best trigger for training adaptation.
Awesome.
All right, everybody, that is part 1 with Serge Pauwels. Just wait for part 2. We get into some more of the races and a whole lot more. Serge is involved with the Belgian development teams, so there's a lot more training tips that you can apply to your own racing. Thank you, Serge, again. We'll be back later in the week with part 2. If you guys are listening on Apple Podcasts, we would greatly, greatly, greatly appreciate you taking 2 minutes, and if we've earned a 5-star review, to leave us one. And, if you can share this with a friend, we're just trying to grow and help more athletes get better. And we have these world-class phenoms sharing their knowledge. Please take the time to share it with somebody else so they can benefit as well. All right. Hope you have a great start to the week and that your training's going well. Talk to you soon.